You're listening to Risky Behavior, where no subject is off limits. Sit back, tune in, and enjoy a beverage with us as we explore controversial issues and answer your health and wellness concerns, ranging from nutrition and exercise to sex and prescription drugs. I'm Dr. Sweta Chakraborty, a national media risk expert regularly on CNN, BBC, Fox News, and more. I'm here with my co-host, Dr. Taylor Wallace, who's seen regularly on the Dr. Oz show. He's off this week, though, so I'm flying solo. Together, we'll loosen lips and spill tea with special guests that you won't want to miss. Today's guest is Delal Pektas.
Yes.
I said it right.
You said it right.
Oh, good. I'm getting there. I have no right to mispronounce people's names, especially with my name being the way that it is.
Sweta.
Right? It's not Sweta, but it should be, because that's how it's spelled.
Sweta, yeah.
No, it's Sweta.
It's Sweta. Okay,
Yeah.
That's not what my producer told me yesterday.
I know, it's complicated because sometimes, especially if I'm talking to those of Indian background, they would see the name. It's a common Indian name.
Sweta is
which is Sweta or Sweta, and that's fair. But we Bengalis like to just mix things up a little bit, and we don't have the W sound.
Okay.
So it's Shata. So this has been the bane of my existence. And I have a little sister who I don't think I've talked about on the show yet, who is named Trisha because my parents learned. 5 years later, she got the normal name.
Okay.
So Delal, thank you so much for being here. Do you want to say a little bit about what interested you in coming on this show?
Yeah, I'd love to. So I am a journalist here in Washington, D.C. And when I met you and Taylor, and you guys told me about this podcast that you guys were doing, and the topic was dating in Washington, D.C., or just dating in general. For me, my experience has been Washington, D.C. area and Virginia and Maryland, obviously. I was like, oh my gosh, I'd love to join because it's hard. It is hard.
Dating is hard. Sex and dating generally is a topic that's still taboo, despite the fact that we are more open in communicating than ever. And the fact that we are actually better at monitoring all kinds of things related to sex, intimacy, dating, yet we seem more disconnected. And so in relation to the topics of the show that we cover, that we offer the science perspectives on these things, I thought it would be really interesting to set this up from a science point of view, talk about sex and talk about dating, and then bring you in and talk about your personal experiences and how that is the reality of what we're experiencing today, despite the stats that we should be happier, we should be more connected, we should be record numbers of interactions in both just dating, romance, and sexual intimacy, but that's not what's happening.
Right.
And I will say that the rates of sexually transmitted disease in Washington, D.C. have increased, but it's not bad news. The city's health department said it's a good thing because what it means is that more infections are getting caught with better screening tactics. So it's not bad. We're actually healthier than we've ever been before, but people are terrified. People are terrified of getting close. Recently there was a story that went around about uncontrollable or untreatable chlamydia. And it was this fear amplification, that is what I study, is why certain things are perceived as more scary than they actually are. And it's a story like this that getting blasted out into the press will freak you out to think about, what if I go on this date, I'm intimate with this person, and then I have to deal with chlamydia that can never be cured?
Right, exactly.
These are the fears that we have, right?
Exactly.
How have you been thinking about this? Is that turning you off from getting closer?
Yeah, I mean,
partners?
For me, my experience, I just don't let it get to that level, if you will. Like, if I'm not feeling it, I'm just not gonna go there.
Right.
So for me, I'm not the, let's just hook up and get it over with, or like casual sex has never been my thing. For me, it's more about, connecting with someone and emotionally, and obviously like physical attraction has to be there. But of course, that's something that is at the back of your mind all the time, is like sexually transmitted disease, because it's not a joke.
Right.
It's a serious thing, and it's about, it's about your life and living with something for the rest of your life. And it's something that people need to be, I think, more careful about. And I think, I've got friends that are not so careful about stuff like that, or they're just,
we're not talking about us, we're talking about our friends.
Right, exactly. And
anything we say about sex is about our friends.
Right. It's to each their own, everybody has their choices and everybody has their preferences. But I think, as you were saying, these statistics have come up. I think, culture also plays a role in that. I mean,
right. We
sure,
both
as a
come from more
society-
conservative
right.
cultures as well.
Exactly. So American society, America in general, sure is more about, more open about sex and growing up in this country. You're taught sex education at a very young age. That's not so much the case in like more conservative countries. You don't find out about sex until like you're in your teens, like early teens.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I think culture also plays a huge role in how you perceive sex and at what age you start having sex.
I like that you brought that up, because that's definitely something from an Indian family growing up. It never came up. The idea of talking about sex, it was such a taboo word. And the idea that my parents would ever have a conversation with me about it was absolute no-go. I learned what I learned from school and education. And I really, now looking back, realized the amount of sex education we got was very heavily oriented on not scaring, but really emphasizing sexual relations resulting in sexually transmitted infections.
Or kids.
Or
Children.
kids. And it was always very much a deterrence mechanism, came from scaring the hell out of us.
Yes.
That if you have sex, you will get a sexually transmitted disease or
get pregnant. Or both.
Or both. So that, I think, has increased. And we're going to talk about like a few trends that have been happening from generation past to the current, to where we are now. Mm-hmm. But what I recognize going through somewhere along the cusp of a millennial and Gen Y is that there was a real campaign across telling young people that sex is bad for these reasons. And there are repercussions to that too. Mm-hmm. So not to minimize the impacts of STDs at all. And at no point am I saying that we shouldn't be mindful of that. And health is extremely important. But are we thinking about when you do one thing, somewhere else is going to get impacted, right? And so what has been the negative impact of campaigning against or scaring children against being intimate? Children, teens, what have you, adults now. Ultimately, the impact from what I'm seeing and from what this article in The Atlantic put out is that people are having like less sex than ever. Mm-hmm. And so it was actually really specific. It came out about last year. Young people are having
less sex.
Mm-hmm. And why are young people having so little sex? And what does that mean for social relations, for mental health, for loneliness issues? How is that then resulting in depression, anxiety, stress? Mm-hmm. There are negatives to scaring people against being intimate. That's the point I want to make.
I think there are a couple of things that they were mentioning in the articles, like 5 things.
Right.
You have the article in front of you?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So why is it happening? So I really think a lot of it was this overwhelming education, but real fear mongering of intimacy. Mm-hmm. I will say that's my point. I know we are definitely not that close on the spectrum in terms of how we feel about this, but I do think rates of STIs are overblown. Mm-hmm. I think even though they're going up overall, the bigger issue is that we have real mental health issues coming out of the lack of intimacy. Mm-hmm. So that's my position. I know that's not necessarily yours, but that's why we're having this conversation, because right. I'm sure we're gonna have viewers being like, I agree, or I can see this side and that side.
Yeah.
But ultimately, what I'm looking to understand is, why is this happening, right? Mm-hmm. So I would say it's fear mongering. That's my point of view. But then this article also has listed out these 5 major trends that have been documented. One is, you don't need a partner anymore to get off.
Right. Yeah.
Sex for one. So masturbation has increased, mm-hmm. but actual partner intimacy is on the decline. Mm-hmm. Now, the hookup culture and helicopter culture, this is another thing. So parents are much more involved in there's no children's activity. There isn't like that much free time mm-hmm. that kids used to have to kind of run around and play and maybe, gallivant or experiment or do different things. Mm-hmm. Parents have like every single hour of the day figured out with extracurricular activities. And it tends to be towards gearing children for the rest of the next stages in their career, going to college, what have you. Mm-hmm. So that has really reduced the opportunity for kids to be kids and to get to know each other. Mm-hmm. And then as they get to the appropriate ages, to actually move to that next level of relationship. Mm-hmm. The Tinder mirage. So this idea that everyone is having tons of sex all the time, and we should talk about this, like dating apps generally, and how that's just completely changed. Yeah,
the
so much
scene.
within like the last
few years. Yeah, recent years.
Yeah. And then bad sex. Nobody talks about that. Women have not necessarily felt that they had the opportunity to really talk about it, to own their sexuality and to say, I like this and I don't like this. It's staggering to me when I was researching for this topic, the amount of women that say that they want to express certain needs or desires, but they're unwilling to communicate it because we still, as far as we've come, we still have the stigma around women and expressing their sexuality and feeling empowered by sexuality. So there's a lot of bad sex out there. So you're seeing a lot of women say, I'd rather not than go to experience that. And inhibition, I believe, is referring to just being more nervous about putting yourself out there, because what is going to result from that? In a culture where everything is so connected, there's no such thing as keeping things private in the same way that we used to experience. So these are some of the major trends that we're seeing happen. So what are your thoughts on some of these? So which one stands out to you?
I think the fear mongering, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, coming from a culture that is conservative, I mean, I'm from Turkey, and I spent part of my childhood there, and then I moved here when I was in high school, basically. And I think that's for sure. A big part of it is fear mongering. Is like, if you do this, then you're going to catch sexually transmitted diseases, or you're going to get pregnant. But at the same time, it's like, after moving here in America, it's like, what is the appropriate age to talk about this? Right. I think sex education is very important, but it's a conversation that needs to happen like for me, the debate would be, at what age do you start talking about it? Right. What is too early? Right. Is it in ninth grade you start talking about it? Or is it in sixth grade you start talking about it? What is too young and what is too old? So number one, I would say, is for sure fear mongering. Two is, I think the dating apps really have made it difficult to get into serious relationships, and some people are really looking for something serious. Some people are just looking to just have fun and casual sex. And I think there are too many options, and too many people are just taking these apps for, just some are putting it to use, some are not, because if you're not just talking to one person, you're talking to 5 people at the same time.
Let me tell you a story about a friend who I will not name. And she, I invited her to come on the podcast, but exactly for that reason, she didn't want to talk about it, but she said I could share her story. Yeah. So the story is, she met somebody who went out of their way to get her number. It was actually on the roof bar of the hotel that we're in right now, Eaton Hotel. And so Wild Days. I've already disclosed too much. And so the gentleman approached her, asked for her phone number, and then she just never heard back. How many listeners can relate to that? How many times has that happened to men and women alike? More women, because still we have the trend of men approaching women. We haven't reached where Japanese culture is right now, for example, where this new phenomenon of men in that culture that are being referred to as herbivore men for not even approaching women, as in there's just absolutely no sexual interest from a man to a woman at this point, even though Japan produces the most porn out of any country in the world, which is fascinating. It's a fascinating 2 trends that are coming out of there.
And also that article that you sent, it was, they were saying, Japan is also having a fertility problem.
Yeah, for that, right. If people aren't intimate, if they aren't moving in together, if they aren't living together, children are not being born. So there's a lot of manifestations of this. And I will continue to draw it back to, we have scared the hell out of a generation about sex. We have told them that it's results in bad things, and even worse outcomes is what we're seeing now. Anyway, I'm going to continue to rant about that. But so my friend basically was really distraught, as anyone would be, when you take the time, spend the time, and genuinely feel like you have a connection, especially because you're meeting in person, but then you never hear from that person again, what we refer to as ghosting, right? But ultimately, the reason for it is outlined not just in this article, but so much research is going into this. What's happening in what you just said is
too many options.
It's probably a numbers game. It's most likely getting as many and I was reading this somewhere too, is loading up your phone with different options and then realizing that you have those options and doing the same thing the next day and forgetting to contact anyone from the night before, and then doing the same thing the day after and forgetting to contact anyone from day 2. So quite literally it turns into this vicious cycle of getting numbers and not calling anyone ever. So it's not even that you've been passed up for somebody else. It's this weird psychological phenomenon of men or women just never actually, just continuously looking for somebody and not actually taking a shot at anyone that they've met. It's weird, but it's what we're experiencing firsthand.
Or worse, they don't even remember who they texted or like what they even talked about.
Right.
Right. But again, like I think some beautiful stories have come out of dating apps. I know couples who have gotten married who met on dating apps, but then there are exactly the problems that you mentioned, is too many options, and people, it also, people just don't take it as seriously anymore.
Right.
Because it's okay, some people are on there to just have fun.
Right. Yeah. And that's so, but then what about the opposite issue, right? That you might want to share, which is when they're too persistent. How does that feel?
Yes, I can talk about that. Well, for me, I don't want to feel smothered. And
right.
I felt like with this particular guy, whom actually I will be going on a date soon.
If he ever hears this.
Oh my God, I know.
These are archived.
I know. I was just, I was a little turned off by that, because it's like, okay, you sent me one text and now you're sending me another and now you're sending me a third one. I am, on the first one, I was going to respond. The second one made me question. Third one, I'm like, I'm definitely not answering because it's too many texts.
Okay, so we talked about this. Yes. And I appreciate where you're coming from. But how much is it, all these trends that we're talking about, that's causing you to feel that way, rather than what a generation in the past might have felt was really flattering or normal, that somebody is interested enough that they are being I can understand when that it turns from persistent to creepy or scary even.
Yeah.
But we're still in the persistent category here.
We are, yes.
And what has happened that we think that is unacceptable or that is strange? So another stat that I saw recently was that men are scared to ask women out physically in bars because it could be seen as sexual harassment. Have we overcorrected? Have we overcorrected to the point where we can't even approach each other?
It's how you ask it, right? Like, are you aggressive about it? Hey, let me get your number.
Right.
And then I've never had that happen to me, where every time a guy has asked me for my phone number, if I'm feeling it, sure, I'll share it. If not, I'm just saying, I'm sorry, I'm unavailable or I'm in a relationship. But so are you like sort of getting into Me Too?
Yeah, because
movement?
Think about it. I mean, the negative of the Me Too movement, even if I can be attributed to that, and as a scientist, we can never say any two things are causal, right?
Yeah.
But I think we can speculate on some of these correlations. And I think increasingly, and again, the sample is our experiences, not just in Washington, but the US. I'm not going to begin to try and understand what's going on because the cultures are so different. So that's not an explanation for what's happening in Japan, for example. I still don't know to what extent they've really, figured out what's happening there. But what we don't want is for US society to become like what's going on, to the point where you're sitting at a bar and everyone's on their phone, and they're swiping, they're on the apps and swiping, as opposed to looking and seeing who's around them. Is it good that we're going from bar culture to app culture? Is it safer that way? Is this a byproduct of Me Too? And if it is, to what extent is it actually better for women? Are we safer this way, knowing people before we meet them, as opposed to having that natural interaction in a place that would be considered normal to, pick someone up, let's say?
Well, I think both have positives, pros and cons, basically. Yeah. I mean, over an app, if you're feeling the conversation, sure, you can make up your mind there and say, okay, yeah, I'd like to meet this person. But that's also happened to me where I wasn't feeling the conversation, that I'm like, okay, I'm really not interested in meeting this person. And then you're able to move on. Whereas I think you might have a harder time at a bar if you were to meet someone. It's like, how do you remove yourself from a conversation without being rude and without, sort of just being hurtful even sometimes?
Oh, that's fair. That's why a woman can't just go sit in a bar by herself. Because at what point, if somebody approaches you, I think one of the big positives coming out of this is like that uncomfortable feeling I used to get at a bar just to have a drink and enjoy my own company. We don't have to worry about that in the same way.
On an app, exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And if you don't feel like continuing the conversation, you can just remove them from the app.
Yeah.
So I think there are pros and cons to both, meeting someone at a bar or at a social setting versus meeting someone over the app. But I've never met this person that I'm supposed to go on a date with soon. So, we
definitely do not disclose his name.
Of course not. But I haven't even, we didn't even speak on the phone. So I'm like, okay, I've never done this before. So let's see how this is going to turn out. And I will report back later.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we have to bring you back on a regular basis and or part of the show can be like a 3-minute update on Dalal's dating life and how it's going. It might be super short-lived.
It might be. Well, I mean, when this first happened, when he first asked me, I was like, oh God, I haven't even spoken to you on the phone. I don't even know what you sound like. But then I was like, okay, you know what? This is an experience and I'm going to keep an open mind. I did draw the line when he said, I can come pick you up. And this is our very first time meeting. I'm like, no,
okay, for any gentleman,
you there.
Any gentleman listening, that is sweet, but don't offer it until you meet
the person first.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, that's a bit much. I'm sorry, no, I will not be meeting you for the first time in your car.
Yeah. No, I think
I don't know who you are.
We can appreciate that. But maybe this person sounds old school. A generation ago, I don't think we would have thought it was that weird for him to offer that, or for him to send a text or a follow-up text and another text.
I do wonder. Maybe you might be right.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So I mean, that changed. There's just that shift, and just us being like, it's really unfortunate. I'm not nostalgic about the past in that sense, and I don't want to age. I don't want anyone to be able to figure out exactly how long we've been dating.
Yes.
But I don't know. I don't think it was better then, but I don't necessarily think it's better now. But what I do think about a lot and worry about a lot is overpopulation, and the projections are that we are going to be at 10 billion people by mid-century. But quite frankly, the lack of intimacy and the fertility rates decreasing in parts of the world suggests that we will reach that peak, but we are going to drop off pretty fast after that. Mm-hmm. If many other global risks don't take us out, right? But then at some point, we're going to have to correct for this. We're going to really have to correct for how much fear-mongering has overcorrected intimacy between young people. Because if you aren't intimate by a certain age, I believe it's 24, and if you don't have that sexual experience, the likelihood you won't until your mid-40s is that much higher. And
Interesting.
So that in itself, we are creating generations. If younger people are having less sex, and for many of the reasons that we've described here, then we're talking about them not even maybe never being intimate, and maybe not being intimate until their 40s. And then in that case, what is the likelihood that we can even have children at that age, right? So there's a lot to think about here, and there's a lot to unpack. And I am a huge proponent of people having more sex. I think there needs to be a movement where practice safe sex, make sure that you are in control and you are not vulnerable, you are not being taken advantage of. And this goes to both men and women. But ultimately, build those bonds that makes us human. Because with that, we're going to start seeing a decrease, I predict, in depression, in anxiety, in stress. These are the things that are real offshoots of this don't have sex campaign, or don't touch somebody, you'll get an STD. And it's not good for society overall. I'll give one example of HIV. HIV has been massively overblown in demographics that were not at risk in the same way. And so the likelihood of receiving the HIV virus through vaginal intercourse is 1 in 1,000. That's a very low probability. I'm not saying that it's not a risk, but it's a very low probability. Yet the messaging around sexual intercourse, heterosexual intercourse, and HIV transfer was massively overblown. And it just created a fear in demographics that didn't need to worry about it in the same way. And that's bad. That's dangerous, because when we have limited resources, we're talking about collective funds, federal funds, state funds, to fight real issues like HIV in the populations that we're dealing with it. Why are we allocating resources inaccurately, right? And we're telling women to worry about it. And again, it is a risk, but that's taking away from really helping those who need it the most, that are more vulnerable to it. So we've really missed it.
So are you saying that there's a correlation between having sex reduces anxiety and depression?
I predict that there's a relationship there, but I don't have the numbers to back it up.
A relationship.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, it makes sense, but then I would think, I'm not a scientist, but I would think that it could also have the opposite effect too, because I mean, if you're not ready for it, for example, and you had that sexual experience.
Totally fair. If you're not, so that's what I mean. I think people need to do it in a way where they feel safe, not vulnerable, empowered. If that needs to be a prerequisite before any sort of sexual intimacy.
There has to be consent. Absolutely.
Consent, and just knowing what you're doing, knowing what you're getting into.
Exactly.
Education, awareness, all of that. That's where sex education fell short. That's where, if there was a real emphasis on understanding human relationships, the importance of human relationships, the mental component of it, all of that communication between two people before you even get to the point of being physical, that was missing. And instead, all we heard was we were going to die of HIV and have babies at teenage years.
Now, having talked about culture and fear mongering, you can't also avoid religion. You know, what big of a role religion plays in a lot of many conservative countries.
Sure.
I'll give Turkey as an example. You're always taught no sex before marriage. Right. So I think that also plays a role in women, generations. Again, there's a generation difference. I mean, from what I hear, I'll talk to my friends in Turkey, and then they'll say, yeah, things have changed. Of course, now people are sexually active before marriage. But I mean, my generation, I think, growing up, I mean, that's what we were taught.
Right.
And I think that also plays a role in women or just, couples. Right. Who are dating. Right. That are practicing that very no sex before marriage mentality.
I agree with that totally, because I think that's part of the misinformation campaign. If we just look at the stuff, whether it's ethics, morals, religion, philosophy, whatever sort of governing system is being put into place to help control physical activity between people, if it's not informed by the base rate stats of actual STI transfer, of actual teenage pregnancies, of real other issues like what is the risk of not having sex. There are those underlying base rate statistics that should be informing how we create that communication and determining what is the right age and what is the appropriate communication at what age. Exactly. Because if we leave it to different perspectives and frameworks, it's going to vary. And it already is so varied across the world. Yes. And we're seeing so many different outcomes across countries. Like we've been talking about Japan and the US. These are very different cultures and very different issues that these countries are facing. And then there's countries that have overpopulation within their countries, and there's a lack of education there in terms of family planning. So there's a spectrum of ways that these conversations need to go and be adjusted according to what the reality on the ground is in that particular culture or country or however you want to define it. But ultimately, let's please always keep in mind what the stats are, what the facts are, and then not ignore and also not realize that there are impacts to every decision that we take. So if we choose to not be intimate, or if we're told to not be intimate, there are going to be repercussions to that too. And that's just what I wanted to chat with you about. I wanted to leave listeners with. I think if I'm watching the clock correctly, we're kind of coming up to the end of our show. But Delal, any parting words? We're really excited for you to have your date tomorrow. I really want to hear about it. Share what you like when you come back and join us. I will.
I think that I know we specifically talked about like the science of it and statistics and facts. And I think one fact that you two can agree on is that, yeah, dating in DC is not easy.
That is a great final point to make. Dating has been, I have been dating too for many, many years. And it is definitely, it is tough jungle out there.
It is.
That we're all trying to navigate. And so everyone just my parting words would be, please be compassionate to each other, because ultimately.
Be kind.
Yes, be kind. We're all in the same boat.
Yes, if you're not feeling it, it's okay to not feel it, and just convey the message.
Exactly.
And then, it's better to be honest from the beginning than just sort of leading somebody else.
Yes. Oh, ghosting. Can we please get rid of ghosting?
Yes, please.
That is like one of the worst things that have come out of our generation.
I
agree. It's awful.
Absolutely.
That's a wrap for today. Have ideas for the show? Tweet us at Dr. Taylor Wallace. That's DrTaylorWallace. And me at Shweta. That is SWETAC. Thank you for tuning in to Risky Behavior.